Adalah, cuma suara. Okay. Testing one. Testing.
Dah ni. Tak kita tu cak.
Testing 1 2 3. Oh, belum dengar lagi.
Dah.
More coming. Akhrun, okay. Amru.
Okay. Dah okey ke?
Testing. You hear us okay?
Yeah, very clear.
All right. Alhamdulillah.
I'm trying to get the live on Shukri is trying to put the live on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not yet in Facebook. It is already in WhatsApp. Dah boleh.
You hear us okay?
Ya. Okey. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam sejahtera. Selamat Hari Raya Syawal. Hari ni hari ke berapa? Okey, ke-14 mungkin. Ya, kita puasa hari tu raya hari Isnin. Jadi saya mengucapkan kepada semua yang bersama kita pada hari ini dari jauh dan dekat, sama-sama kita meraihkan Syawal selepas kita sama-sama beribadah secara intensif dalam Madrasah Ramadan. Pada hari ini we would like to continue our discussion on Islam and secularism. This is a revisit, or I would say that it is a revision from time to time. We would like to read old books, and that's my passion at the moment. I found that old books bring not only memory but synchronize with our understanding in the past. So when we first read the book, probably about 30, 40 years ago, we can feel that it was very difficult because at that time probably our understanding from framework perspective, worldview perspective, or from language point of view was not very good. So, but now, after having many years of experience and learning, we can read the book from different angle, and inshallah, I think it's much easier for us to understand, and not only that, but to relate to the situation that where we are now at the moment. So this is the second time we discuss about this book. I hope that we can discuss three times. Unfortunately, I'm going to travel for 100 days on the 16th of April, so we have to postpone the class, postpone the session. So I hope we can do it again first or second week of August. Yeah, I'll be spending 100 days in 15 countries, visiting 40 institutions, and sharing, giving lectures and whatnot in 40 institutions. So inshallah. And one of them is Ibn Khaldun University in Istanbul. So I hope we can reconnect with my colleagues and then try to explain what we are doing here. And from time to time, probably Professor Al-Pasalan is very close to us. Is going to host me in Istanbul for a week. With that, I would like to hand this over to Professor Zainiy Uthman.
Thank you, Dato Seri. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu syafi'an biya musallim wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Thank you again, Dato Seri and Puan Seri for hosting this. It's a wonderful occasion to be able to discuss about books, and especially one of the great books of the Muslim world of the 20th century, I think this book is uncontested, but for many people, they may not be able to understand why. That many who have encountered this book, they regard this as a great book of the Muslim world of the 20th century. Because I think, from my personal reading of it, I encountered this book accidentally at the age of 18 years old. As like Dato mentioned, it was very difficult. I came from a Malay medium, so having to read this book at the age of 18, it's really a gargantuan task. It took a long time to actually being able to absorb it. But my good fortune is that I was somehow, during my undergraduate studies, somehow the studies enriches the studies that I went through, enriched my experience, and the reading that I have gone through in the classes at the University of Wisconsin Madison somehow open up many things that I mentioned in this book in a very indirect way, because I didn't plan it. It's just something that I thought I want to do it. For example, I took, like Dato is saying, languages. You know, I decided to study Arabic, and I really didn't know why, but I just had this interest of studying Arabic at the University of Wisconsin Madison. Alhamdulillah, I mean, it's part of the College and Letters and Science, so that made it easier. And then there are classes on history of science, taught by David Lindbergh, one of the authorities on the transmission of learning Greek to the Muslim world, and then from the Muslim world to the Latin West. So he wrote books about Al-Hazan and many others. So fascinating, and this is why I think this book is very important, because it strikes an interest for a young person like myself. I thought, I regard it was a challenge for me, and I still remember one of the main book that is mentioned, the footnote, that I started to seek out and read was Man and Nature by Syed Nasr. And that was mind blowing, as they say, you know, because it further opened up many different dimensions that I have not thought about. Partly, I never knew Islam was so involved as it is. And this is why I think Prof. al-Attas entitled this book Islam and Secularism. Because for many of us, I think, we don't know what Islam is. It pretty much becomes a cultural identity, but not an intellectual conviction. And that takes a lot to make an intellectual conviction. But what I mean by that is, like Dato Seri Zainiy Ujang becomes an a water chemistry expert. It takes a lot, and sometimes it takes a lot of work, intellectually, physically, being involved, giving time. We don't do that. We do not make a conscious decision to tune our intellect to study Islam. We become Muslim culturally. And this is why it becomes so difficult for us to evaluate things on the basis of reason when it comes to religion. It's always emotionally driven. And emotion is very bad because it will somehow drive you to extremism. And this is what we have seen in the advent of many religious exhibition of zealotry, not only among Muslims, but also among Christians. You know, human history has that negative aspect of it. And I think this is why this book is very important. And as Dato Sri was saying, that, you know, we need to revisit it. It is really important. Great books need to be revisited. I remember being a University of Chicago graduate, we are always fascinated with the great books of the Western world. And great books of the Western world, we must understand the background of it. Why, for example, the Bible is not part of it. For us, the great book of the Muslim world begins with the Quran and the Hadith, and on all the shuruh and the tafasir, betul tak? but not in the Western world. The reason being because the great books of the Western world is a celebration of the human mind, of the intellect. And that pretty much a project of the Enlightenment, the project of reason, the discovery of scientific principles. And this started in the 17th century. The precursor to that was the 15th and the 16th century. And this is why, for example, many of us Muslims, we fail to appreciate this part of history, Dato. And thereby there is a serious case of historical dissonance among us. We somehow appreciate the breath of fresh air of discoveries of modern science today. But for some reason we forgot that the discoveries of modern science, which basically began in the 17th century, the days of Newton, the days of Pascal, D'Alembert, Voltaire and others, began the 17th century, the century of Nuruddin Araniri. The precursor was the Muslim contribution to science, which was completely blotted out of our history. Because the 15th century, the 16th century, were the centuries of the Ottoman Caliphate. And as I mentioned in previous meetings here, the history of the Ottoman Caliphate in the historical consciousness of the Muslims, with the exceptions of the Turks, we don't know anything much. We have created a demarcation, a separation, a divorce of, for me, unspeakable, because we don't know Ottoman language, as a scientific language. We don't know that Persian played very much an important role in the construction of the scientific language of the Ottoman Caliphate. So this synergy or synergistic and organic relations of Islamic languages are missing. So much so that, I'm sorry if I were to criticize a little bit, some universities in Malaysia, we have faculties of Islamic studies, but we don't have Islamic languages being taught. They don't teach Urdu, they don't teach Persian, they don't teach Ottoman. So therefore, the whole wealth of discovery in science are unknown to us. And when it comes to Arabic, we somehow, like Prof. al-Attas mentioned here, Dato, we somehow limited it to the study of fiqh. And so appreciation for Al-Biruni's work on sociology, like Kitab Ma'ara al-Hind, the Book of India, was never read. It's translated by Orientalists. And then the book of, for example, Nuwairi's, Nihayatul Arab fil Funun wal Adab, which is an encyclopedia of scientific nature, but it's only work as a PhD somewhere in Princeton or Yale. But no ulama touched it. And in fact, if we were to pour in the books of fiqh, and this is what Dato Zaini was asking last time, what are the contributions of our traditional ulama that somehow led to the secularization of the Muslim world? Mm-hmm. Because of this limitation or limiting the meaning of fiqh, and Professor al-Attas mentioned this, you limit fiqh instead of understanding of the world entirely to becoming fiqh of the legal kind. This has somehow make it more limited. And this limitation somehow results in the fact that when you study science, you're not Islamic. And this is what is happening now. I remember I was somehow, I'm sorry to share you with a personal thing, I was somehow told, Zaini, you cannot teach Islamic studies. And I said, why? Because your basic degree is not Islamic studies. You studied physics. So that's the kind of mentality that we created. What happens is, you created an insulated and isolated Islam. Insulated and isolated Islam. And this is what al-Attas was saying in the chapter on the Muslim dilemma, which I mentioned last time.
Peace.
It was, let me see. This is what Professor al-Attas was talking about, the case that led to what is called the loss of adab. Page 106, Dato, because I want to go as fast a little bit. What he means by loss of adab here is not mannerism and good behavior or decorum or showing respect to people. But worse is the loss of adab towards knowledge and its authorities. And this is what is happening today. You see, Ibn Rushd, he was trained in the traditional Islamic setting, memorized the hadith, the tafasir, and what have you. He became an accomplished qadi. And he has a standard text that's being used in, I think maybe in Al-Azhar, Bidayatul Mujtahid, isn't it? Which is a basic book on fiqh. But he wrote commentaries on works of Aristotle. Why are commentaries on works of Aristotle very important to understand? Now, loss of adab about knowledge, not loss of adab in ways of treating people. This is where it is unfortunate now that people who are trained in Islamic studies, because their language is Arabic, primarily Arabic, they are not able to appreciate languages in so-called sciences developed in the West. The reverse is the same. People who are trained in the West, they do not appreciate technical terms in Arabic. I remember I was writing a book in Malay, and I splinter it with, I put very heavy Arabic terms. And it was read by one professor in biology. And he said, Zaini, I don't understand what you're writing here because it's too Arabic. He can understand Latin technical terms, but he cannot understand Arabic technical terms. This is language dissonance, and this is loss of adab too. You see? And this is what is happening, Dato. At the end of this book, Professor al-Attas commented about the idea of core knowledge in Islam. So where we have experts at their peak of their academic and professional, they are still alien to technical terms in Islam. So much so they just like toddlers or rugrats trying to study Islam. Merangkak orang kata, And these are the people sometimes they create problems in trying to propel Islam, because they're always trying to bring it down to the level that they understand. They're trying to fit Islam within the worldview that is much shaped by Western worldview. And this is what Professor al-Attas was saying here, the problem of equality, right? Yeah. So let's go back, Dato, just to start out. I have to say something about secularism. So Professor al-Attas mentioned secularization is a process that is an unending process. This is page 117. Page 17. Sorry. Secularization is defined as deliverance of man first from religious and then from metaphysical control over his reason and language. This is what I want to demonstrate. So when you have professionals who are accomplished in their field, but when you give them Arabic term, they become allergic. They don't know it, you see. So this is robbing of the person of the reason and language, because languages shape your reasoning. Language shape your reasoning. You give one word, and if you are completely oblivious to Arabic Islamic terms, where are you going to grope for the root meaning of the words? You're going to go to the next available meaning in your head. If you're being fashioned by the Western worldview, that's what you understand. And unfortunately, this is what is happening now. That's why Professor al-Attas was saying, the deliverance, metaphysical control from reason and language. As I said earlier, why Aristotle was very important. Ibn Rushd studied Aristotle because one of the fundamental contribution of Aristotle was metaphysics. Apart from his physics. Ma ba'da tabi'ah, after tabi'ah. See? And the Muslim scholars were smart. They go for that. And this is also, the reason why Tasawwuf begins with metaphysics. Talks about the meaning of existence. Ah. So now, for example, people think about tasawwuf is just, doing your extra prayers, extra this, doing dhikr and what have you. No, there are something beyond that, and that has to do with the meaning of existence, which may not be the place for us to go into detail here. So it is the losing of the world from religious and quasi-religious understandings of itself and dispelling of all closed worldviews, the breaking of supernatural myths and sacred symbols, the defatalization of history. This is the project of enlightenment, the 17th century thinkers. And if you've been following my Facebook, I'm sorry to make an advertisement, I put a book called The Dream of Enlightenment by Anthony Gottlieb, if I'm not mistaken. And he has another book called The Dream, or the Something of Reason. You can see the list of scholars or thinkers that he listed to be the purveyors of enlightenment. And it's a fascinating book to read.
Yeah.
The kind of, that book is basically, if I were to make a comparison, but not equal, but in terms of analysis, it's almost the same as Abul Hasan al-Sha'ari's book on Milal wa Nihal. Not Sharastani, And then there's also a book on Ibana, because it talks about the very fundamental idea of what is in your mind. Sometimes we study books on Firaq, Baghdadi's book, Al-Farq Bain al-Firaq. We study them as if, we're trying to oppose ideas. And this is what is happening now, to see. We are using books on Usuluddin, trying to depose others of different opinion. That was not the purpose. That was to show faults in reasoning, which is very much a philosophical activity. Because what is being punished is not what you think. Unfortunately, that is what's happening today. We have thought police. What was being policed at that time was activities. What do you do as acts? If you say something, you are all right. That's why we have strange poetries, works that say many things. But once you act upon them, and if it is against the dictates of the Sharia will reign supreme. That's what happened to Hallaj. And that's how Raniri justifies the judgment that was meted out against Hallaj. And Hallaj happily in a sense accepted it, because he knows, much the same, I'm sorry to say, like when Socrates was found guilty by the Athenians, and his students said, we can sort of, take you out, you can escape this. But he said, no, he wants to live by the rule of law. And that's why the dictate was, he has to drink that hemlock poison. He died. Because law must be supreme. Because he was found guilty of polluting the minds of the young Athenian. Again, as I said, thought police. See? So, secularization is that, number one. Number two, secularization encompasses not only the political and social aspects of life, it's also the cultural, for it denotes the disappearance of religious determination of the symbols of cultural integration. This is what Prof. al-Attas later on says. There are three elements of secularism, not secularization. This is the process. Secularism has three things. Number one, disenchantment of nature. Meaning nature has no longer spirits within it. We want to get rid of spirits because, that's not the right thing to believe that there are spirits indwelling some of these natural aspects of the world. That's disenchantment of nature. But we want to put back the function of God, angels, And that's how they wanted to get rid of it. Two, the desacralization of politics. And this is what it has to do with religious symbols in determination and cultural integration, because politics is very much about the way we live. Remember, politics is not party versus party B. Politics means the way you live in a city. That's what it means by polis. Polis means city. Politics means how do you live in a city.
Polis means city.
Yeah, it's a Latin word, means city. It's also Greek. Urban is in Latin. Polis is city. That's why we use the term polis for people who look after the well-being of law regulation in a city. That's the police. Yeah, the army is a different method. The army looks after the border. Yeah. And the third element of secularism is the deconsecration of values. Values are no longer derived from religious sources. It's derived from human reasoning. And this is why the great books of the Western world comes into the picture. It is celebration of the human intellect. That's why it has no, it is, a Bible is not part of it. It is about man discovering the world of nature. So you find the works of Aristotle, you find the work of philosophy, and then find the works of mathematics, all kinds. Amazing. Literature. But for us, if you follow the basic curriculum of whatever, you can basically, we are studying the great books of the Muslim world, actually. It's just that our contribution to civilization is just tremendous. I mean, Taj al-Arus, just the dictionary alone, is more than 10 volumes. Who would have time to read that? Of course, you're not going to use it. The only thing that may come in comparison was some years ago, Oxford Dictionary Unabridged Edition was 22 volume, hard copy.
But it's not written by one person.
It's not written by one person. You're quite right. But our dictionaries was written by one person. You see the immense knowledge that they possess, and this is something that is quite unique. And we don't tell this story to our younger generation. The appreciation of history is just not there. I don't know what happened. This is why I said, Alhamdulillah, I'm lucky that when I was studying at University of Wisconsin, I was able to sort of dive into this. And this is why I was really thankful to Professor Dustin Cowell. At the end of my studies, I said, Professor Dustin, you don't know what you have contributed to my life. You opened the door to a treasury of knowledge which was completely madnoon to me, hidden. But now suddenly I can slowly open it. I think I felt like Ibn Sina being opened the library of that Sultan when he managed to solve the medical problem. Remember? The Sultan allowed him to use the library. Oh my God, that was really something. So this is what happens now. We are now living in a situation where it's a criticism against us that our education system, like Prof. al-Attas is saying here, is perpetuating these elements of secularization. Because, as I said, there are many parts of our system of education are not designed in such a way to bring about a complete man. It's very interesting because look at this loss of adab. I will explain later. Loss of adab implies loss of justice. Page 106. Yeah. 106. Which in turn betrays confusion in knowledge. So, who defines knowledge to us now? Like, for example, the purpose of knowledge now, I'm sorry, it is useful, but because we've forgotten our own vocation for knowledge, it's all right to use the Maslow theory, it's actualization. But what is the purpose of that actualization? You want the person to be just an engineer? But for us, it's to become the obedient servant of God. In the meantime, you become a very good engineer. That is missing. You see or not? And this is why I think the reaction of other compatriots, people from other religious, cultural tradition among us Malaysians here, they might not be able to appreciate what we are doing, partly because of they have been bombarded with the idea of religion, and particularly Islam, in the modern days in such a way that it is so skewed that Islam is terrorism, Islam is extremism, Islam is not open to others. Islam is stupidity, lack of reason. So sometimes we can understand, appreciate, and can tolerate their anxiety towards religion, because they live in a secularized world. They don't have religion that is part of it. So for them, the modern world is very much a happy world. You know? But for us, this is where it lies. We have a confusion of knowledge. And this is what Prof. al-Attas talks about. There is a need for us to revisit the idea of the Islamic university. Even you can have a university, but infuse with it with certain elements that bring about man, proper man. So, the condition, confusion in knowledge of Islam and the worldview of Islam, that creates the condition that enables false leaders to emerge and thrive, causing the condition of injustice. And this is what we are facing right now. This injustice, you want to get across someone with an idea about Islam, it is so difficult. Just like Dato was saying, you know, want to put something about Islam, we have to consult this person, because we have not developed the complete person that is Muslim, that, you know, he's confident with what he's doing in terms of living Islam. So you have to go and check with so-called authorities. That's not doing justice. That is injustice to yourself. That means you do not have the requisite knowledge to live.
Selalu Prof. Attas sebut false leaders. What does it mean by false leaders ni?
Okay, he mentions here the condition of error in knowledge, confusion, error, creating the condition for the loss of adab within the community, rising from 1 and 2, and then the rise of leaders who are not qualified for valid leadership of the Muslim community, who do not possess, this is what he refers to, high moral, intellectual and spiritual standards required for Islamic leadership, who perpetuate the condition 1 above, which is confusion, error in knowledge, and then to ensure the continued control of the affairs of Muslims, of the community, by leaders like themselves, who dominates all fields. Meaning, you know, if the West now understood that, number one, if you want to do something great, bring great people around you, isn't it? And that's why, for example, why success of Harvard, the best minds are there. But now we don't have it here. We don't celebrate great ideas, great thinkers. We don't want dissenting ideas. We celebrate yes men. And this is what is happening. And this is a false leadership, because once you surround yourself with yes men, you tend to be blinkered. You're not being able to see what is not acceptable. So false leaders, that's what Rasulullah is saying here. You do not have the high moral, intellectual and spiritual standards. Look at 107. The interpretation and clarification of knowledge about Islam and Islamic worldview is accomplished by authority, legitimate authority, recognizes and acknowledges a hierarchy of authorities culminating in the Holy Prophet. See? This is unfortunately missing now, because what Prof. al-Attas is saying, there is a living tradition in this, you see, because the authority of the Prophet, unfortunately now we understand knowledge is basically the diraya, which is studied, you know, which is certified, you know, you go to institutions. But in the Islamic tradition, it's not so much what is academically trained that you have knowledge. There are others who are not. And this is the tradition that we have. And we are missing that tradition. We are missing that tradition. And this is why I think too heavy reliant on qualification today. Whereas what is happening now in the West is the opposite. They realize that qualification is not important now.
Malaysia Qualification Agency.
Oh, sorry. He's the No, we have to have that, because we need to certify things. You see, that's a different matter. We need to certify things. Like, for example, a friend of mine, we used to work together at Istad Library, Herman de Leeuw. He developed something called digital certification of certificates. It's based in Groningen in Netherlands. So that when you transfer, your academic qualification digitally, how do you know that it's not fake? So he developed something like that. So unique qualification like that. And this is why I remember many years ago, somebody asked me, Zaini, how do we know that somebody is knowledgeable? I said, there's a saying, birds of feather flock together. Only people with knowledge knows people with knowledge. And that's the qualification part. And this is why you do not take the praise of people lower than you as something, how do you say? It's not an encouragement, really, because they're acknowledging something that, I'm sorry to say, they really don't know. And this is why for us, when we want to become, or in the Viva process, you have to be examined by your peers or somebody even higher. Third, for the PhD, it has to be by somebody like a professor and not a junior academic. See? You have to have that qualification. So it is incumbent for us to have the proper attitude towards legitimate authority. What's happening now, you can see, even among our so-called presently traditional ulama, they are attacking the great ulama of the past. They are attacking Shafi'i, Itu Professor al-Attas, you're not even at the level of their foot, and you're attacking them. Reverence, love, respect, humility, and intelligent trust can only be realized when one recognizes and acknowledges the fact that there is hierarchy in human order, in authority within the hierarchy, in the point of intelligence, spiritual knowledge, and virtue. And this is what is now, let's say, missing in our education. Betul tak? The virtuous aspect is not there. And when Prof. al-Attas mentioned about intelligence and spiritual knowledge, tak ada. Our knowledge is basically intellect of a different kind. It's actually reason. Yeah. This loss of adab, Prof. al-Attas mentioned in page 110, is basically due to the process of loss of injustice. He says, the chief characteristic symptom of loss of adab within the community, 110, is the process of leveling that is culminated from time to time in the Muslim mind and practice in society. That's why I can criticize Shafi'i. I can criticize this, I can criticize some even want to criticize the Sahaba.
Leveling tu apa maksudnya?
Regarding them the same.
Okay.
You bring them to the same level. Yeah. This is, it is unfortunate, really. Particularly, this is what I said, when we learn differences of opinion, right now we are using it for discrediting others, not to appreciate different modes of thinking. And this is what I thought our great ulama was doing in the past. When Ibn Rushd was studying Aristotle, he was appreciating the method of thinking of Aristotle, what I would call an intellectual project. That's why ulama don't call Ibn Rushd kafir. Although he made commentaries of Aristotelian ideas, it's fascinating, really. For many of us, it's still a standard text to read. Because you see, Aristotle don't believe in existence. He believes in things. And this is I backtrack. The problem with secularization in the West, within Christianity, was because of for some reason, there's the Hellenic idea of being merged or married with the Judaic Christian, unfortunately later on, with the idea of time. Because prior to Aristotle, there is a problem of understanding being. Aristotle understood that the world is created of things. And this is the idea of tawallud, generation. And he talks about generation and corruption, meaning things comes from things. So the question is, what about being? And for him, being is what is called secondary intelligible, a concept, you know. But for us, being is not a concept, it's a reality. And this is why wujud is sifat Allah Ta'ala. They have no conception that wujud, existence, is part of the characteristic, the nature of God. That's why, I'm sorry, Christianity, the Christianity in terms of Trinity, they talk about God, they talk about the Son and the Holy Ghost. But when you talk about being, oh, that's philosophy. And when you go to philosophy, oh, are you Aristotelian? Or are you Parmenian? Are you this? And this is the problem of secularization, the very root of it. The first chapter was about. I do not want to get into detail about it because it's completely a different process. So I want to describe to you. And this is why our ulama in the past don't have that problem. Alhamdulillah. Because Allah wujud, qidam baqa, mukhalafatu lil hawadithi, qiyamu binafsihi. Their characteristic or nature of God is really problematic. They do not have something like this. Because they have something called hypostasis, you know, God goes into this, into that. But for us, it's real. Allah wujud. And that wujud is not a concept, it's a reality. Just like, for example, when we say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Rahman is sifat Allah Ta'ala, and it is true and real, isn't it? It's not something that it can be there and not there. So this is the real cause of secularization in the West, as we see. So this, when he talks about the leveling, and this is why if you can admit that there are different people of different intelligence, there are different degrees, right? Like in the West now they regard all people like Einstein genius, you know, among physicists, or Feynman is here, this is here, this is here. Because they have discarded, they have put aside the spirit part. They don't regard people of different spiritual standing. For us, this is why among prophets, you know, there are ranks and degrees of them. Even among prophets, right? So therefore, this is what Prof. al-Attas was saying, and this is what I said in my al-Attas of psychology. There are 4 kinds of knowledge. Number 1, revelation, wahyu. And in wahyu, there are different degrees that is gifted to the prophets. They're not the same. And this is what Prof. al-Attas was saying. Look, the prophet had 23 years with revelation. See? Other prophets did not get that long, an exhibition. And they did, some of them were given books, some of them are not. See? So
is Bible, the so-called Bible, from the understanding of Christians, from God, or interpretation of what God already revealed?
The Bible, it's interesting that you raised this point. Bible is from the term biblio, which means a book. So therefore, it's not the language of Jesus. Jesus spoke Aramaic, you see. It's very difficult. That's why it's not a preserved book. Even the name of the book is not there. It's given in another language. Can you imagine? The name of the holy book for the Christian is gifted in a different language, which is, Biblios is what? Greek, I think. Bibliophile, bibliography, you know. It's not the language. For us, the Quran is a name. It's not even given the name Al-Kitab, you know. It's described as Dhalik al-Kitab, that book. But the Quran is a name. And the same thing also. This is a very unique feature of Islam. The name of the holy book is mentioned. The name of people submitting to God, Muslims, mentioned. The name of the Prophet mentioned. And not only that, as I was explaining to some students of Casis, why the Prophet Isa referred to the Prophet as, you know, min ba'di ismuhu Ahmad. And then other names of the Prophet he is referred to as Muhammad, you know. The explanations to this. So this is why we need to understand and to go deeper into these sciences, and this is part of the continuous study, which is why Prof. al-Attas later on says in the discussion about Islamic University, you have to have fardu ain, fardu kifaya. The fardu kifaya are the normal sciences that we learn to make a living, to perform our duty as Khalifatullah fil ard, that we are entrusted with a certain kind of amana to look after the welfare of the world, to become environmentally sustainable, to become rationally superior in terms of ideas and what have you. But at the same time, we have to have this fardu ain, which in other religious tradition is just not there. Other religious tradition, if you become religiously trained, you become a religious person. Not in Islam. To become a proper Muslim, you have to be religiously at the very core of it. I shall demonstrate. Why? What is the Arabic term for university? Jami'ah. What is the name? What is the Arabic term for a place of prayer that brings everybody together? Jami'. You cannot separate the two. And this is why, Al-Azhar began as a jami', and then it grows because there are circles of learning that takes place. These circles of learning in Islam, it is when you sit down, it is a place to study. So it's called madrasa, where dars is taking place. You see, dars is taking. So this is why Professor al-Attas was talking about interconnectedness of meanings in Arabic language that create a universal perspective of worldview. So madrasa is a place where dars is taking place. What do you do during a dars? Either you read a book, or you write a book, or you explicate a book. So there's the word kitab. So where a place of a book is being written is called maktab. The writing is called kitab, kataba. You see? Kataba, yaktubu, maktab. So now you have the Quran, you have the kitab. It's all connected. So therefore, reading, writing is part, although far removed, but it's part of the dhalikal kitab, la roiba fi. It is that shade of meaning. What is the purpose? When a mudarris stands or even sit and teach, today we call that kulliyah, right? We call it kulliyah to refer to a faculty. Why? The purpose is to make the person whole. That's why it's called a kulliyah. See? It's called kulliyah. And you can see that at the end of this book, Dato, when Prof. al-Attas drew the picture of what Islamic University is all about. It is on page, on the chapter Dewesternization.
158.
158. Yeah, 158, 159. See? So it is very much part and parcel of that. And whereas the whole idea is to make a universal person, so that his fardu ain and fardu kifaya completes him. See? And this is why I'm afraid also today, too heavily an emphasis on religious things tends to separate or divorce people from so-called this worldly sciences. That shouldn't be. Yeah. It's a good thing that now the government wants to embark on what is called STEAM. But that arts, you see, still, we must infuse it with the proper elements of the Islamic religious knowledge. This is very, very important to see, which is what is missing today. What is happening now, as far as secularism is concerned, this is what Prof. al-Attas is saying. We now face people who are trained not in the tradition of Islam. This is page 113. So, and as I mentioned, the project of the Enlightenment, the West, you see, and we know what happened in the 15th century, slowly the transference of knowledge from Spain, the Muslim Spain, the fall of Muslim Spain, knowledge was brought to Paris, to Italy, and then to Oxford, where universities started to sprout, and chair of Arabic being developed in Oxford and what have you, for the purposes of to draw knowledge from the Muslims. Why? Because Muslims at that time was at the peak of scientific and knowledge contribution, let us see. So that is why at that time, it's not surprising Aquinas was reading Ghazali. And today, we are at the tail end. We are following the West. That is why we are quoting more of the, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is what is happening. And so much so that we venerate their language.
Mm.
You know? If you look at, there's a book that's published in Brill, by Brill, the 17th century Arabic interest, where scientists at Oxford University, they're required to have language requirement of Arabic. And their communication at that time among them was in Arabic.
Mm.
And some of them would have their tombstone written in Arabic, because it was a language of science. It was a language of high culture. See? Today is the reverse. You cannot talk in Malay unless you sound stupid, for fear of sounding stupid. Or you have to speak in the rojak language, as I say. Neither high level Malay nor high level English. You just campur like this. It's unfortunate. This is what is happening to us today. Partly we talked about last time, we don't read literature. We're not encultured in literature proper. We don't read the right literature, both either in English literature, Western literature for that matter, or in the Islamic literature. So what happens now is that these people, for them, their heroes are Rousseau, Comte, Mill, and this is what's happening now. Betul tak? You see among yourself, the younger generation, we are the old timers.
Yeah, okay.
The younger ones, they are now
Accepted.
battling. They're battling with their contemporaries. People are talking about, Rawls, you know. I remember someone came to my office. I don't want to mention name. The way of thinking, which is completely un-Islamic. He said, the Mufassirun, they just put words to the meaning. This is the accusation the Quran make of the Jews. يُحَرِّفُونَ كَلِمَ عَنْ مَوَاضِعِهِ. Now they're using the arguments against our ulama. Subhanallah. This is what's happening. It's a scary thing. And then they realize it because they think, this is such a new argument I can use. They have no respect on the authority and the bear of responsibility of a great ulama. They don't just write things like that. You think people just put words like this?
Yang pakai DeepSeek tu tanya langsung.
DeepSeek is based on algorithm. They just collect here things there. It's useful. It's useful. But again, like a friend of mine, Dr. Shukri, he's an expert on AI. You have to train AI, ChatGPT, whatever, to finally make it your own. You can have it to mine the data, so to speak. But an expert will know whether you use the construction of the key technical terms are in the right places or not. Yeah. I've tried DeepSeek. It's quite good. But you still know they're missing some parts. Yeah.
Hmm.
So this is why we still need human authority in terms of knowledge. It's fascinating because from the days of the cuneiform to the days of the hieroglyphs, data were already there, but you need the human mind to extrapolate. It takes the ingenuity of the human mind to break the code of the Rosetta Stone. It's not that long ago. It's only 1800s. Yeah. So therefore, the languages that we talked about, Dato Sri, when you look at knowledge, it's just intellectual and not spiritual. This is what's happening. You think that it is work of the human mind, that you can put meanings like this. And this is why it's very important what Prof. al-Attas mentioned in his book, Covenants. The wahyu goes to the qalb of the Prophet, and the qalb somehow impresses upon the intellect, and then the intellect somehow then works to the point that he physically thinks he's hearing something. That part between the qalb and the intellect, that is the spiritual part of knowledge, which is missing. And this is what Prof. al-Attas was saying. Now the West looks at the rational aspect, the intellect aspect. And this is why I was explaining intelligential capacity only has to do with judgment, clarification, discrimination, and distinction. And this is why when we are thinking, we get very anxious. We have to make judgment, we have to make clarification, we have to make distinction, which word to use and that word to use. But at the qalb level, you don't feel it. Why? Because the meaning are so, how do you say, I do not want to use the word inner, it is so latifa, it's so subtle, it's so pure that it goes straight to the qalb. Our problem is our intellect cannot tune in the qalb aspect. Why? Because our intellect is so tuned to the nafs aspect. And this is what the empirical world, which is what we are now living with, scientific tradition in the West now is very much empirical. But when it comes to the world which is unseen, they are lost. And I can give you an example. We appreciate this yellow light, yes? It's actually an effect. Light is actually an effect. It's not a reality. The reality is, well, it's very difficult because you might say a photon is moving, yes? But what is a photon? Is it a particle? If it is a particle, then we might see indentation somewhere. We don't see indentation, no lekuk-lekuk on our dahi. It's subtler than that. So therefore, light, photon, is also an effect of something. It is an effect of the motion which was propelled by energy. You don't see energy. That is the mystery of physics. They don't see energy. They can measure it, 60 watt bulb of electricity.
But cannot see.
You cannot see energy. So the same thing about existence and all. This is why they stop there. Fine, Now that's the other part. This is where metaphysics comes into play. This is why the discussion about whatever, So physics and quantum physics, going the string theory, whatever. You go into the realm which is basically unseen. But you do not want to admit it. You still want to bring it down to the level which is measurable. Some things are just beyond your measurement. And this is why, although the Quran says, La yukallifullahu nafsan wus'aha, Allah Ta'ala will not burden you beyond your capacity, right? You and I never know our capacity. Dato Seri nak pergi 100 days of lecture. This is truly a modern. Dulu, Dato Seri, you are called a vagabond scholar.
Vagabond scholar, okay.
Meaning, a lesser word, traveling scholar.
Scholar.
Vagabond scholar dulu go for asking for money, but you're not. You are going there to share knowledge. It's a different thing. And this was the work vagabond scholar dulu in the Middle Ages. It's like that. They want to raise money, they want to make a living. So you are now a traveling scholar. It's a new phenomenon. I think he started something new.
Macam intellectual pilgrimage, macam Peter
Gigits. Peter Gigits, yeah.
Pada Harvard.
Yeah.
So what's important here?
Yeah.
Adab consists in bawah 115. Adab consists in the discernment of the merits, not of the faults.
Yes.
What the merits determine their place in the hierarchical order.
Yes. And this is very important. What Prof. al-Attas, I read again. Adab consists in the discernment of the merits, not of the faults. For the merits determine their place in the hierarchical order. Maknanya, you look at what the person is good at, what he excels, not him and his failings as a human being. His failings as a human being, you must use the measurement. which Professor al-Attas mentioned in this book, and that measurement is the hadith about the signs of the munafiq. Because a true scholar cannot lie. A true scholar must live by principle. And that is why there is a saying, apa? Kullu murran, kullu, walau kana murra. Qulil haq. Qulil haq. Speak the truth, even though it is bitter. That has been the maxim. That's the maxim. So I remember Dr. Ugi was making a joke about this. You know, a man goes home hungry, he eats, and then was not happy. So, kulil haq, walau kana murra. So he has to say to the wife, this is a bit bitter. So the wife answered back, kul haq, walau kana murra. Eat, although it is bitter. Makan. Pahit macam mana pun makan. No, this is important. This is what's happening now. People wants to look at the faults of some people, some ulama, and they, no, that's not the adab. That's not the adab. Because this is what, I remember Professor Ibshili, when we visited him in Turkey many months ago, he said, Zaini, there are many faults in our ulama. Why we don't talk about them? Because we look at their merits. The faults of our Sahaba, not to make them superhuman. Now, that was very interesting, coming back to the idea of superhuman, because I was thinking about this to say today. The hierarchy of spirits, spiritual, intelligential, whatever. The West has brought everybody level, right? Everybody's equal now, but they
One vote with one vote.
Yeah, but now, in order to create, they have to create superheroes. You know? So they have to have Batman, they have Superman. Everyone, somebody, gifted with superpowers beyond normal human being. See, but in Islam we don't teach people with superpowers like that. See, this is now being fed in the imagination of the people. So much so that people think there are people of this nature. No, this is just imagination ran wild. You can have it. It's fun. It's fun as entertainment, and you have to have this also. And this is what Professor al-Attas was saying in his book, The Nature of Man, the Psychology of the Human Soul, that we have this faculty in ourselves called the khayal and the waham. The khayal is the imagination, the waham is the estimation. So estimation uses the khayal. Okay, we have man. Can we estimate that this man is beyond normal man? So we give him the power of flying. Yeah, you can. And we give this this man was bitten by a spider. He became now you create something imaginative but still fun. So in the same way, you can create imaginary world. You see, but is it based on something which is true and real? And this is why, if you read any books in Islam, written by the great scholars of the past, they always begin with salutation of the Prophet after Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, because this is the beginning of everything. God is the source, the cause of everything. And this is why now, Uthman, I was asking why we have, you see, in the Western world, they talk in philosophy, they talk about material cause, they talk about formal cause, then they talk about efficient cause, but they never talk about God, because God is never a cause. Yeah. So we, as again, coming back to this issue that you see, they look at adab, look at the merits, not at the faults of the person to bring him down. Look at the merits. And this is what is happening in you can see now in the West is celebrating merits of people, right? But we don't. On the criticism of fiqh, Professor al-Attas mentioned that in page 118, and to answer what Dato Seri was saying about false leaders, our task ahead. This is page 132, Dato Seri. Our task ahead is to represent the true leaders of the past in truer light, to exercise justice in our estimation of them, from whom our predecessors derived guidance and knowledge. So see, this is why we talked about last time the importance of learning history, isn't it? But not history as a subject of history, but reading the great works of the Muslim thinkers. This we don't have. Because we somehow relegated their works as no more in currency, outdated. See? Whereas in the West, they're still reading these works because they want to see the very root, the history of ideas, how things develop, right? But we don't want to read these works now. For example, why Tusi precedes what's his name? The geometrician, but he somehow translated the works of Euclid, the work of geometry later on. So Tusi did that. We have Biruni who collected all the theories about, you know, arcs and what have you. We don't read this anymore because we don't regard that as science, because it's somehow in Arabic. We have this language dissonance. That is, when we look at Arabic, oh, ini agama. Agama not of any use. We want to read, you know, real scientific work. This is what we are missing. Remember, from the fall of the Hellenistic Roman Empire, which was like the 5th century, 400 something. Yes?
476.
Yeah, that's my assistant, research assistant. She reads the Roman world. But the 5th century, the Prophet came 6th century, 570 was born. And the burgeoning of knowledge, what have you, goes all the way to the 1500s. The 16, 17, 18 saw the age of colonization. And this is what Prof. al-Attas was saying. The reason why we suffered this loss of confidence in our knowledge, in our tradition of knowledge, because of colonization. Somehow, by virtue of that, our system of education was supplanted, and a different style of education took place. And the appreciation somehow being, you know, placed on that system of education, that somehow create this so-called loss of adab. We forgot our history. Now, unfortunately, people who are trained in modern sciences, physical sciences, especially, they cannot go into the historical text like this. So maybe we need something, you know, something to develop these things, you know, because in as much as we have properly trained in Arabic, in Al-Azhar, in Jordan, and others, but they too find it very difficult to jump into the text, which is so-called physics in nature, metaphysics in nature, because their reading is so out of place in terms of time. See, they did not bring it to the contemporary discussion of the matter. By that I mean, you know, for us in the academic world, there is still discussions on philosophy about Ibn Sina, but that Ibn Sina is relegated into philosophy, Dato Sri.
Ibn Sina.
Yeah.
He is also in medicine, kan?
It was in medicine, Kanun Fatib. But you look at any faculty of medicine, do they read again Ibn Sina? No, they read the modern ones only. See, in the history of medicine, they mention, but you don't go into the history of it. And this is why it's very difficult. Must you include history in the study of any sciences? I think you should, to develop an appreciation. This is why I think I was lucky in the University of Wisconsin Medicine. There is a course on history of science. History of science, where you read the great works of the Western thinkers and scientists. But for us, we don't have. We don't have. You read the words of Banu Musa. It was Husni only read it, you know, and made it into a master's thesis. So this is where we are missing, Dato Sri, and this is what Prof. al-Attas is trying to emphasize, that we need to de-Westernize knowledge. De-Westernize knowledge. He didn't talk about Islamization as yet, but that goes without saying. That goes without saying. Now, in order to carry out this project, you have to have people with the right mindset, meaning critical of the West, having mastery of the scientific tradition of the West, but at the same time having mastery of our own tradition. Otherwise, it becomes a failure. This is completely this is what is now being being experimented, so to speak. But you can be the judge. I don't know. This is what we are going through right now. We need to de-Westernize knowledge because, again, we need to remind ourselves. What do we mean by Western? So, page 134. Western civilization is the civilization that evolved out of historical fusion of cultures, philosophies, values, and aspirations of ancient Greece and Rome, the amalgamation of Judaism and Christianity, and their further development and formation by the Latin, Germanic, Celtic, and Nordic people. From ancient Greece, philosophy and epistemological elements, and the foundation of education and of ethics and aesthetics. That's why you have paideia, And then the bookish aspect, the book aspect of it is called encyclopedia. Then, for some reason, we translate the idea encyclopedia as mausu'ah. It's a completely Western idea. Yeah. We wrote encyclopedias. We don't call it like Nihayatul Arab fil Funun wal Adab. That is encyclopedia by itself. But now we have to. It's completely Westernized now. This is what we are facing. This is what Prof. al-Attas used to say. Even Arabic now being Westernized. And this is why he was going. The word secularization. Why is it called ilmaniyah? When the word is ilm. Ilm is properly Islamic. You shouldn't call it ilmaniyah.
The Arabic panggil ilmaniyah.
No, he disagrees with that. Because you denigrate ilm. That's wrong. And we'll get to something which I want to say in a bit. In the same way, I remember that it was 1982, I was there. When Prof. al-Attas talked about this book that was gifted to some people, Islamization of knowledge, because de-Westernization of knowledge, then people talk about Islamization of knowledge. And some Arabs, I'm sorry, Islamiyatu ma'rifah. Lagi Prof. al-Attas was saying, what are you talking about? You don't know Arabic. Ma'rifah is peculiarly, quintessentially Islamic. You cannot Islamize Ma'rifah. It is the quintessential knowledge. It's the peak of knowledge. It's called Ma'rifatullah. How can you Islamize it? Because Ma'rifah has been secularized to refer to specific knowledges. Betul tak? That's what Prof. al-Attas is saying now. We are suffering from Westernized, secularized Arabic minds. That's why kadang-kadang when I read thesis in Arabic, I say, where's the halawatul lugha Arabiyah? That tak ada. It's missing. Because you read as if you're reading newspaper. It's missing because they don't read the classical works, the earlier works of the great ulama, That is what's missing. So, foundation of ethics and morality. This is what it is until today. We are basing it on a Western standard. We cannot come up with. So even macam Ustaz Rohidi must know the challenges of building a properly Islamic school. Kan? It's not easy. So, what is the purpose of knowledge? That's the other thing. When you make knowledge becomes pragmatic, that is, I want to become an engineer. That is only this worldly. So we did not teach, as I said, we have not taught what is the purpose of having knowledge. So we miss out in the very definition, what is called the mission and vision of becoming a servant of God. Because now you become a servant of the world. I want to become an engineer. That's it, you know. But as a person, you cannot become a good imam because you think imam is somebody, not you.
So we are being categorized by our profession.
Ah.
So you are imam dan sebagainya. This is very interesting. This morning we had MQA retreat lah kat atas.
Oh.
And we were discussing about the trend in education, higher education at the moment, where instead of being super specialization, the needs now is for people who can appreciate many things.
Yeah.
Then balik kepada liberal arts di Amerika lah. You learn physics, 2 subjek, languages, belajar 5-6 languages yang lain, you know, mathematics a bit. Itu yang popular sekarang ni. Tsukuba University that started here, they are using liberal arts as their first programs.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult to sell to Malaysian parents, because Malaysian parents would like the children to become engineers, accountant, doctors and whatnot, you know. I mean, sedangkan keperluan semasa sekarang ni ialah orang yang teachable.
Dato, see, that's the other aspect which we forgot, and that is the aspect of education. Is it for life or just in the academic part? That's the part that we're missing. Our universities are not open so far. You know, we are not open. We have some octogenarian who went to study, get a PhD at the age of 70, what have you, right? Fine, but we did not build in a concept where higher education is open to all, where you can get this thing. You know, for example, okay, you can become an engineer, become like what's happening to. I'm sorry, not to speak too much about cases. We have a retired professional from Singapore. They're not here today. They're consultants. They have their profession even today, but they're willing to continue their studies at CASIS to deepen their knowledge about these things. This is what I'm saying. It's not so much certification, but more of a challenge of building what I wanted to say earlier, the kulliyah, the completeness, the universal person.
I think this is very important.
This universal person.
Siapa yang ada intention nak buat Masters PhD, please go into the professions of our scholars in the past. I was told that Imam Syafi'i, dia punya daily work dia ialah not sebagai guru, not as a teacher, not as a professor. Ya, ada ulama kita tu yang kerja dia salin buku, ada yang kerja jual kasut.
Abu Hanifah was a trader. Was a merchant.
So they are not mufti, they are not ustaz in our context. Then kita boleh tahu saya belajar Islam because this is what I need to do in life, but to support my life I have to do other things. Ini yang tak berlaku. You are saying precisely what I have in mind. Sebab tadi kita bincang panjang macam mana kita nak sekarang ni the so-called clientele of our education is between the age of 15 to the age of 90. Macam mana kita nak support people at that.
Yes.
Okay lah, daripada umur dia 18 tahun sampai umur 25 tahun, they learn certain knowledge, enable them to become a teacher ke doktor ke engineer ke whatever. But they need to study throughout. Lepas tu kata they want to specialize, sub-specialization on it. I think the age of 30. Lepas tu takkan dia bekerja je, dia nak belajar juga. I mean, assuming they want to travel around the globe, they have to know about geography, they have to know about IT, macam mana nak buat kerja-kerja ni, apa semua kan. And then baru jadi a person, kuli tu. So, kalaulah kita buat PhD, cari betul-betul apa tugas setiap ulama ni. Dia sebagai tu. Someone mentioned that dia belajar tentang Latin scholar tu as tulisan dia tu just purposely because of his interest on the person, make commentary on it. Not because he's a scholar on that person. Yeah, so this is something interesting for me lah. Then getting closer, that people come to university to learn, not because they want to be someone with the knowledge they have and then stopped. Tutup, habis dah. Lepas tu.
Good point, Dato. Meaning bring back the universal aspect of the university, and the product is in the person, not in the university itself, but the person coming out, who graduated, mutakharijun itu, a person of complete universal skills and knowledge. That will be a more fulfilling life.
So sekarang kita ada dua benda yang besar dalam higher education blueprint towards 2035 ni. Satu, what we call as micro credentials. Macam kita akan pergi jumpa ulama, Ustaz Nizam contohnya pergi jumpa ulama dekat Yaman tu, dia belajar satu kitab je, iaitu Riyadhus Salihin. Ijazah kan, you dapat ijazah Riyadhus Salihin, it is micro credential. Riyadhus Salihin saja. Lepas tu pergi cari orang lain pula baca Ihya Ulumuddin, dapatkan tu, so dia ijazahkan you setelah khatam dengan ulama ni, and this is ijazah can be oral kan. So lama-lama dia ada 100 ijazah, making him a kulli sebagai seorang scholar yang tu. I think that's the principle of Islamic dulu lah. Bukannya kita duduk ngaji kepada seorang guru tu daripada tahun 1 sampai tahun 4 and you graduate, okay, we give you ni. Dia just portion of it saja dia belajar.
So that's a good point, because Dato' say this is where it drives the point home, and the purpose of fardu ain is minal mahdi ilal lahdi, and that was missing now. And I always raise this point. For example, it may not be in a formal education setting, like it can be in a professional setting, but you can bring these micro credentials at the workplace. For example, somebody from UTM can go and teach at Petronas that module. After a certain time, it becomes credential. You know, and the person works at Petronas for 30, 40 years. When he or she retires, he feels fulfilled. I know my Arabic now. Well, I remember a person coming to study Arabic at ISTA when he was 70 years old. He was a classmate of at that time he was 60 or 50, classmate of Dr. Mahathir. And I asked him, Dato, why are you studying Arabic at this age? Because dia kata, before I die, I want to understand what Al-Fatihah is all about. So after 3 years at ISTA, he said, Zaini, today I understand what Al-Fatihah is. It's such a feeling. So this is what we must have. What people talk about learning organization, but many of our good organizations are not teaching. They're not giving opportunities for people to learn. Now, funny thing, you have ceramah dekat surau sampai people are tired of it, Dato' Sri. Betul tak? You can have that. That's for general knowledge. But can you not go a step further to turn it opportunities for micro credentials? You know, you attend, you do homework, you know, so that you go to work a certain time is fulfilled for your personal development. It may not be with the university per se, but the university bring it there. PJJ of a different kind.
Dia ada dua PJJ sekarang ni. Satu is fixed menu, satu lagi is open menu. So yang Singapore and US buat sekarang ni open menu. You pergi nak belajar apa ya? Nak fikir cerita tentang politik Amerika, ambil politik Amerika. You learn betul-betul politik Amerika one semester and you boleh tahu macam mana politik Amerika is all about. Kemudian katalah orang cerita pasal AI, okay, next semester belajar AI pula. Dan you belajar tu because you want to increase your understanding on the actual situation at that particular moment lah. Barulah kita punya absorption tu semakin tinggi dan kita can really participate in the process. Otherwise kita just belajar untuk satu tempoh yang akan datang, kita tak tahu bila kita nak appreciate benda tu balik.
It can work, insyaAllah.
And US buat, ada satu kursus dia buat, Dia pakai design your own curriculum. Degree dia BA je.
Yeah.
Ya,
And when I was at University of Wisconsin, that is called independent major. You can have your own major.
Ya.
You just fulfill the credits, 120 hours in the humanities, in the College of Letters and Science, but it must be a major that is meant for you.
Di Denmark ada sebuah universiti yang dedicated for that. Di Roskilde nama dia, universiti tu. Roskilde. Ada seorang profesor kat UTM graduate daripada tu, Profesor Amran. Amran apa nama kalau ingat? Amran.
Ya, gemuk-gemuk.
Ya, Amran. Sebab tu dia lain sikit. Sebab dia design his own curriculum. Ha? Siapa?
Amran.
Amran dah dia dah pen. Dia kat UTM, kat JB.
Yeah.
So, but that university was meant for design your own curriculum. Roskilde tu. Yeah.
Is our university ready?
I think MQA dah open up, so there will be more. Sekarang pun industri.
I can sit down with them, propose, okay, within 4 years.
You buat apalah yang nak.
And then at the end of the day, UTM, whoever ready will.
Yeah, you come out dengan your portfolio. You ambil semua, you have to show lah, you have gone through processes, ambil courses. Katalah kelas ni kita boleh jadikan micro credential, but you have to get his signature lah to bagi you.
It's like kalau dalam F&B, you sit down with the chef.
Yeah, master. Yeah.
Kan, you want extra topping.
Yeah.
Semua. But pizza is still a pizza.
Yeah. If you are very good at it, you become Michelin chef.
Yeah.
You create your own, kan?
Yeah. The innovation, the bid'ah on higher education ni berlaku selepas Perang Dunia Kedua.
Yeah.
At that time, orang after World War II, they have no job to do. Jadi university was asked to design a curriculum tu yang jadi 4 years curriculum tu. Initially, I was told up to 10 years. You have to become a master. Itu yang jadi sampai PhD tu. Sebab scholars masa tu are PhD holders. I mean PhD lah, doctors lah. Yeah. Walaupun orang tak panggil dia doktor. Kecuali medical doctor saja panggil PhD. Doktor. Yang lain tu panggil scholar lah. Scholar. Yeah. And then masa Perang Dunia Kedua tu dia kata we don't need a scholar, we need a worker. Jadi tu jadi 4 tahun. Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
After Perang Dunia Kedua.
Yep.
Semua benda-benda yang berlaku 4 years program ni after Perang Dunia Kedua.
It's outdated.
Yes. And then sekarang ni problemnya ialah 4 years ni dalam masa 2 tahun dah tak relevan lagi yang 2 tahun kemudian tu. Kalau lah you want to be in job market. So this is what people are discussing at the moment lah. Jadi kita regulate 2 years saja minimum. Kemudian tu yang 2 years lagi tu design your own curriculum. Ya, sebab ketidak memang kita tak sempat pun.
Wow.
Nah, orang semua kan salahkan MQA. MQA ni tak bagi. Okey, kata okey. It's up to you. Kita nak gubal akta apa? Nak pindah akta ni, nak bagi flexibility. Please.
Okay,
we have another half an hour.
this is about the end part of this book. Because it's very important, I want to emphasize, and I think why Professor al-Attas end this book with this also, and I think it's very important, I want to emphasize, because there seems to be a confusion of terms, but I want to put his position clear, and that is between Islamization and integration of knowledge. Because people have said that Professor al-Attas used the term integration juga. But I want to clarify you, and it is at the page 162 all the way to 164. The present situation with regard to formulation and dissemination of knowledge, this is what we're talking about, in the Muslim world, we must see the infiltration of key concepts from the Western world has brought confusion which will ultimately cause grave consequences. So there must be a process, Dato, where we teach to critically look at these concepts and not entirely throw them out. No, I mean that's what education is all about, to become critical. You can learn but be critical. This is the critical aspect, is at the higher level. Yes, if left unchecked, it will give grave consequences. So what is formulated and disseminated in and through universities and other higher institutions of learning from the lowest to the higher levels is in fact knowledge infused with the character and personality of Western culture and civilization, molded in the crucible of Western culture. Like Dato was saying, it's after post-World War. It is created like this. Did we have a response to that? This is why, we may talk about, Kairawan is the oldest university. We may talk about Azhar, but the impact is not seen so much because maybe the impact is subdued because of what is happening now in the present scientific and technological world. Because Azhar and Kairawan, we are interested in building human beings. You see, although these human beings become, as I said, isolated and excommunicated because they cannot communicate to the outside world. You see, the minute they walk out with their jalabeya or their juba or whatever, religious. But the minute they walk out with their Western gown, educated.
Professional.
Oh, professional. So, so you have problems whether you want to wear the songkok or you want to have the mortarboard at graduation. You still have this problem. This is what we must realize, and it's a good point that MQA is now, taking these issues. So this is why this book is really a great book. It's fascinating because it revisits the idea. So we must first to isolate the elements, including the key concepts which make up that culture and civilization. The elements and key concepts are mainly prevalent in the branch of knowledge pertaining to the human sciences, the liberal arts, as was read. This is page 162. Although it must be noted that even in the natural, physical and applied sciences, particularly where they deal with the interpretation of facts and formulation of theories, the same process of isolating the elements and key concepts must be applied. That's why we need what is called Islamization of the concept, not integration. People mistake because people thought that, we bring Western knowledge, integrate with it. It doesn't work because when you have integration of that nature, you will create internal combustion. Betul tak? Because the two are not at peace. Because you're bridging something of a different kind of innate energy. Yang satu going for this worldly. The other is the other so-called the other worldly, but also this worldly. And that's why you have clashes. So it's very important. I will demonstrate in a little bit. So therefore, the Islamization of present-day knowledge means precisely after isolation process referred to. Oh, Prof. Atta marah sampai 3 R. The knowledge free of the elements and key concept isolated and then infused. This infusion of Islamic elements and key concept, which in view of their fundamental nature as defined in the fitrah, in fact imbue the knowledge with the quality of its natural function and purpose, and thus makes it true knowledge. This is what is meant by Islamization of knowledge. How to do that? You can read, but I want to go below. It started out, he says, 163, with the core knowledge at the university level. The core knowledge at the university level, which must be formulated
Before
that of any other level, must be composed of ingredients pertaining to the nature of man. Sekarang ni nature of man jatuh psychology, Western psychology, behavioral sciences, cognitive days, B.F. Skinner, Freud, Jung. Not psychology of Of Ghazali, not psychology of whatever, our great scholars in the past. That's why Prof. al-Attas wrote the book, The Nature of Man and the Psychology of the Human Soul. We must read that again. That's the first thing. See? Then, the nature of religion. He has a book, Islam, the concept of religion, foundation of ethics and morality, and man's involvement in it. Because the Western conception of religion is that it is an encumbrance. It's an impediment to scientific thinking. It is useless, And this is what people are thinking about, even in some among young Malays now, who call themselves Muslim, but they completely happily admit that, you know, religion is an impediment to my understanding of science. This is what is happening now. And some of them innocently do not know. They do not know that their mind is shaped in such a way that they don't have any appreciation of religion. They don't have any appreciation of religion at all. Hari Raya is cultural. It's not a religion, you know. It's a very sad thing that is happening now, and it's not easy, really. But that's how they grew up. Immense involvement in it, and knowledge, the meaning of ilm and ma'rifah. Because as I said, you know, even some people talk about Islamiyatu ma'rifah. How can you have that? Like people saying Islamization of tasawwuf. No, tasawwuf is tasawwuf. Because somebody wrote a book, Islamic Mysticism, tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is not Islamic mysticism. Tasawwuf is tasawwuf. It's not even mystical. You know, for people who are really Sufi, they talk about it being mystical. There's nothing mystical about going to pray 5 times a day.
What is mystic in Malay? Kalau yang salah lah.
Dia yang salahnya dia pergi translate jadi ilmu kebatinan.
Kebatinan lah. Kebatinan tu macam
even lagi rosak. Dia rosakkan yang batin.
Tak, mistik tu dalam bahasa Melayu batin kebatinan.
No, it is a wrong interpretation because mystic is only an experience in the Western concept. They how do you say, secluded themselves from public social life. That's for them mystics, you know, and things which are beyond the explanation of reason and intellect. It's mystical knowledge. For us, Wahyu is not mystical knowledge, isn't it? Ilham is not mystical knowledge, because, you know, all scientists admit to intuition.
Yeah.
Why do you call that? That's why we don't have this idea of mysticism. We have to use it when it comes to discussion, but what they describe of mysticism, it's a completely alien to us, especially. We don't call it mysticism, we call it tasawwuf, that's it. See? That's why you cannot equate. It's very difficult, you know, it's Sorry. Islamic mysticism. Yeah, Kalabazi's ke? Kalabazi's work. What is that word? Ta'aruf li madhab al-tasawwuf. Yeah, he translated that as an introduction to Islamic mysticism. This is what I mean, a Western conception looking at us. It's like that. It's like trying to say, Muslims, they follow Muhammad, jadi they are Muhammadans. Just like us, we follow Christ, so we are Christians. It's okay. No, it's not okay, because we don't follow Muhammad, we follow the Quran. The Prophet only, you know, he lived, show us. We don't become subservient to him.
Mungkin dalam konteks budaya kita, the simpler and the easiest way to dismiss benda yang kita tak boleh explain, kita mesti aneh kan?
Aneh, ya.
Mesti, jadi kita pun tak boleh tanya beliau.
Tahyul.
Yang ajaib lah, yang pelik.
Anyways, let's go on. Ilm and ma'rifah, wisdom, hikmah and justice. And this idea about hikmah also I mentioned the last time in one of the meetings here. You know, hikmah bukan kuasa sakti. Hikmah is a minute, a smaller version of judgment being given at the right place, at the right time, in the right dose. Itu maknanya hikmah. You know, kena tempat, masa dan amountnya. Itu what is called hikmah. So dia menjadi, dia membekas. It carries the right effect. See? That's why kata-kata hikmat, which means one of it is kata-kata perangsang. Words of encouragement becomes, you know, words of wisdom. Sebab itu for the Muslims, you know, wisdom is the lost property of the Muslim. We pick wisdom anywhere. That's also the reason why I said wisdom ini is the second after revelation, because it's gifted to certain people. So you have wahyu, you have wisdom, revelation, wisdom, and then ilham, intuition. Certain people get it, not everyone. And then lastly, ilm, the general knowledge that has to do with knowledge of the sense perception. So basically, I'm sorry to not to look down at it, but science and technology is really the lowest knowledge. But this justice towards knowledge and adab towards knowledge, we reverse, isn't it? Now we see knowledge of this world, the world of sensible experience, as the highest knowledge.
Yang profession yang banyak gaji.
Yeah. Partly because, again, George Saliba in his book, I forgot the title of the book, Islam and the Making of Renaissance, if I'm not mistaken. He sort of give an idea, because we had, remember Dato, we were in Ditchley roundtable discussion. People asked him why the Muslims did not develop science as it is, technology as it is in the West. That's the part of consumerism which is missing. See, the West, they learn how to make clocks from the Muslim. See, all for example, the small gears of the clock, the moving parts, that was developed by al-Battani. They miniaturize it, and it becomes a watch. People can buy it. So then science becomes an enterprise. So you can pay for your research, and this is why you need to pay for your own research. or companies must pay for your research so that there is ROI, return of investment. So now you're looking at the fastest chips, advanced artificial intelligence chip and what have you. The next thing, but that's a different matter. So the point is, we develop knowledge, but our knowledge was not in such a way that it is become a consumer product. We have astrolabe, but it's only available because it was very expensive, available to some people who can afford it. That's the other thing. So in many parts I would agree with that. And then the Western world developed capitalism. The idea of, you invest money to do, and this is what we have now, return of investment in whatever. So anyways, but the ilm and the ma'rifah aspect, we need to actually drum that again, because the purpose of education, as I was saying, what is the purpose of education? For you to become an engineer, become a doctor, kadang-kadang macam some people after studying law degree, I don't want to become a lawyer, I want to become a farmer. So where do you get that extra training? You want to go to Mardi? Then people say, well, are you crazy? You do not look at the fact that the man wants to become a complete man. So that's whole worldview has to change. So ilm, ma'rifah, wisdom and justice. We need to teach again what justice means. And the foremost thing, what Prof was saying, is we must learn justice to our own selves. And that is the most difficult part. See? To do justice to your own self. With respect to man and his religion. And then the nature of the right adab, the right action, which is amal and adab. These have to be referred to the concept of God, His essence, the attributes, which is tawheed. The revelation of the Holy Quran, its meaning and message. The revealed law, sharia. What necessarily follows from this is to learn about the Prophet, his life and sunnah, the history and messages of the Prophet before him. And then finally, Professor al-Attas was saying, this must be added the knowledge of Arabic language and of the Islamic worldview as a whole. Listen to this. This core knowledge, integrated and composed as a harmonious unity and designed at the university level as a model structure and content or other levels, must invariably be reflected in successively simpler forms at the secondary, primary levels of the educational system. This is what he means by integration of knowledge. The knowledge of history, the knowledge of the Prophet, not integration of science and technology, revealed knowledge. That doesn't work, as I said. Because the worldview is not clear. How can you? Because that must be, you must isolate the key terms, the concepts and what have you. But this core knowledge ni, Dato' Seri, the Arabic language, the history of the prophets, we keep on saying missing, betul tak? I remember when I was in sekolah menengah, I was depan, I don't know how many of you learn from buku Tawarikh. Remember tak? Buku Tawarikh. At the end part, cerita Buddha, cerita itu, and then Muhammad. But, tapi, so he becomes a great figure in history, but has nothing to do with history. Because they are regarded as founders of religion. Buddha has no connection with the history of India as a civilization. Nampak tak? We don't teach, we didn't learn, I did not learn that Buddha, for that matter, that was one of the reasons where I somehow realized, I duk baca banyak cerita piramid ni, Firaun apa, it's so fascinating, you know, the mystery, 7 wonders of the world. Where was Musa? I heard he was in Egypt, but where do you put him? Nampak tak? There is historical dissonance. That was the thing that create my interest so much in this field. Why is the history of the prophets so separated from civilization? I want to understand why. Ibrahim, who was thriving in the land of Ur, Iraq, was never mentioned part of Babylon. It's still missing. No one can give me a synergistic and real history. Ibrahim is still he's a prophet, fine. What has he got to do with Babylon? Malish. We don't know. Betul tak? Ataupun mafish. Nothing. This is what is happening, Dato' Seri. Great men of history has been sequestered, put in a nice box. That's why I think the Quran was saying, Ma kana Ibrahim Yahudiyan aw Nasraniyan. He was neither, you cannot put him either a Jew or a Christian. But he was kana Nabiyyan wa Rasulah. He plays a universal prophet. You see? Because prophets and Anbiya, they place a universal message. Itu yang Prophet trying to explain. We must bring back, otherwise, this is part of the secular education that we're still victim of. The workings of and this is why it's very difficult to say the golden age of the Muslim is not the Abbasids. It's during the time of the prophets. Betul tak? You know what kind of slap it is to the Prophet? You did not bring the golden age of Islam. It's the Abbasid. Ya salam. Ooh. It's the Orientalist vision. Betul tak? Because they look at with the so-called the burgeoning of science and technology and what have you, of course. Aduh.
Okay, kita ada sikit masa lagi kalau ada apa-apa. 10 more minutes to go.
Yeah, nak stop dulu.
Kita mungkin teruja lah nak belajar banyak perkara kan. Tapi di sana micro-credential. Macam kalau nak diberi pilihan keutamaan kan, excited nak belajar itu, nak dapat menjadi the complete universal man tadi tu. Kalau segi keutamaan ialah dengan usia dan sebagainya kan, macam mana kita boleh susun keutamaan tu supaya kita tidak quote-unquote tenggelam ataupun ini tak capai, sana tak faham, ke sana ke sini kan, nanti terkorban dalam perjalanan pula kan. Jadi mungkin Prof boleh bagi pandangan. Terima kasih.
I think that's a very good question. Where to begin? Remember, our basis and our what is that? Stepping stone. The stepping stone for every Muslim is the Quran and the Hadith. And this is where our ulama has started out by saying you must have the knowledge of the tools. And that's what Prof. al-Attas was mentioning. Added to this, the Arabic language. If I were to recommend, please learn Arabic. But it must be done in a way that you go simultaneously and concurrently with other things that is so light but gives you inspiration. Do not try to read something very heavy. It will not work. So, you started out with Arabic, but at the same time you read about the history of the Muslims. If it is too much, because it can be too much. For example, who are the Mamluks? Who are the Seljukids? Who are the Ayyubids? Who are the Zenj? Oh my God, it's too big. Just read great personalities of Islam, you know, and of their time. Meaning, for example, during the time of the Prophet, if you are into literature, maybe read the poems of Hassan bin Thabit. You know, read his poetry, what it's all about. Because it is said that, you know, he's making jihad using his poetry. Yeah, there is a literary part of it, you know. And then you might want to read about the biographies of people who copied the Quran, so that you can, oh, this is how they learned. Remember, Arabic of the Quran is not Arabic of the spoken Arabs. You want to learn Arabic of the Quran, not Arabic. It doesn't work, okay? So learn that. And remember, learning Arabic or any languages, because it's not our native tongue, it's not easy. So give yourself time. Do not rush it, you know. If you have the luxury, because minal mahdi ila lahdi, do it concurrently. And learn, macam kata, it's better to learn little and remember than to learn a lot and become disgusted. See, this is why I think kalau in academic setting, they push you. If you have that luxury of being pushed, fine. But if you're not, then take it one step at a time. And that can be, I think, worked out. So, if you want to learn Arabic, maybe learn with it alongside with the reading of the Quran. I remember that's how I studied. I was learning the grammar with Professor Dustin at the university. Coming back, when I read the Quran, I try to relearn which is the harful jar preposition, which is the definite article, which is the noun, which is the masdar, which is the fa'il. I did it on my own while reading the Quran. That is how I became to appreciate the Quran better. See? Because then you learn, you know, i'rab of the Quran, which they have a book now, you know. So that gives you a more intimate, you know, association with the Quran. Not only you learn the language, and then at the same time you can go into tributary knowledge. For example, in the Quran that talks about Iskandar Dhul Qarnain, you're not sure, then you might want to read about Alexander the Great from the Western sources, and then you read, if they are available, writings about Alexander the Great in the tafsir, in the commentary. If you cannot find it, then you might ask some ustads who are reading it. Because, like, for example, Razi in Mafatihul Ghaib, he talks about Iskandar al-Qarnain, and he reasoned out, you know, all these things. So that makes it even more interesting. See? And there are many aspects in the Quran which, again, you might also need to compare, not compare in the sense which is right, which is wrong, but bring so that it can add to your knowledge, greater understanding, and that is reading other. For example, you might want to read the Bible. You might want to read the Jewish text also, just to see if you're interested in that line of a thing. But I highly recommend that you read biographies of our great ulama in the past, because they are scholars in their own right. No. The sad thing is that many of these things are in Arabic. They are, for example, Hayatus Sahaba. Not people don't translate it. It's still in Arabic. Sayang, kan? So this is why we need this enterprise of translating these great works. I'm sure there'll be a great demand for this. You see, books on Ilmu Rijal. Unfortunately, as I said, when people read Ilmu Rijal, they read in a context of trying to zero in on hadith, whether it is, you know, mursal lah, mawdu' lah, itulah, da'if lah. They forgot the life history of this Rijal yang thiqah, yang hujah. It's fascinating to read their history, but it's being kept by people who learn hadith. They don't talk about the person, they talk about the matan and the rawi, itu je. But the story behind them, you see, for example, slowly now we learn about how Bukhari, all the way from some land that is so far from Makkah, Medina, managed to collect this and then become Sahih Bukhari. You see why the Westerners find it very difficult, because they think, why so far a distance, but this is regarded as, second to the Quran. They don't realize these are, sayings of the Prophet, but they found it very difficult because in their tradition of writing the Bible, it's a different method. They claim, the writers of the Bible, they were inspired, divinely inspired to write these things. We don't have our muhaddithun, they don't claim they are divinely inspired to write. They went to seek the rawi, betul tak? This is empirical evidence. Not only empirical, it's from the horse's mouth, as they say, It's from the horse's mouth, and they still want us to doubt, So, appreciation of this, Dato Sri,
Yeah.
it's very important. It's a rich tradition. Tapi nowadays, we tend to find great awe and amazement in Hogwarts School of Witchcraft. No, in School of Al-Azhar. Yes.
Tadi masa dalam kereta tadi saya dengar Prof said we have created Islam in such a way insulated and isolated Islam. Okay, my question, two lah, sub question. One is, how could these walls possibly survive for so long? One, who are the wall apa nama ni, the penjaganya? So what should we do, or the first step to, is it possible, what do we need to do to tear down the wall? The wall. This tadilah, the insulated, the isolated, kan tadi kan. First is how could the so-called wall possibly survive for so long? And secondly, what should we do to slowly or whatever it is to tear down this wall?
Well, this is really another session. But my point is this. You see, in order to break the wall, we must identify the wall. What is that wall? That wall is communication. A friend of mine and a friend of Prof juga, Abdul Malik Mujahid, he said, the problem with Muslims, and particularly Muslims in Malaysia, you're not good at telling your history, your story. You are success in modern times. We can live with different religion harmoniously. We don't have, whatever. The language part, that's another thing. We have not learned how to tell our story. To put it in a more Islamic term, we're not good at making dawah. We are very bad in making dawah because, again, dawah is very religious. So religious that, for example, the aspects of Islam, we are not good at showing cleanliness. We don't show. Although, an-nadhafatu minal iman. Being on time, we're not good at time. Respecting others, we're not good at respecting others, I remember somebody said, if you are on time, you're already late. Yeah.
So kalau kita business school, kita ambil course marketing, fail lah.
Okay. See? Whereas we have been trained to become appreciative of time. For example, you have to pray at the earlier time, or the point is trying to inculcate with you the discipline of respecting time. So before you pray, you make wudu. What does that mean? Cleanliness. But we don't. You tengok some tempat wudu dengan berkulat dengan, I'm sorry to say these things, betul tak? And we know that mold and things like that can be source of diseases. But we don't clean our surau. You go at the musalla of any shopping mall, the first thing that strikes you is the pungent smell. It's not the beauty and the musk smell of the musalla, but it's a pungent smell of not proper ventilation. Why? Because we do not demand proper ventilation in our surau. So it is put at the parking lot with no windows. You're lucky to have a fan, but when you close the door, there's no ventilation. Doesn't go anywhere. OSHA, Occupational Safety Hazard.
I want to respond to you tadi.
Okay.
it's about 30, 40 years ago, we had number of brilliant Muslim students. They suddenly decided to not continuing their study at university level, not only in Malaysia but also in England, not in the US, because they found that the real knowledge that they need to know is Islamic studies. Ya, lepas tu dia, dan I found some of them dia tak belajar habis pun. Ya, yang ada kat UTM 2-3 orang yang saya kenal tu, they stopped studying mechanical engineering year 3 and then they discontinued education throughout their life. So what I think important for us, you keep with whatever you do at the moment, you be good at it.
Yes.
But at the same time, kita ambil lah micro credential yang berkaitan. Say for example, you put aside 20 hours a week, contohnya, you learn this year Arabic, belajar Arabic. Then you can revisit Arabic tu probably 2 years after this, 3 years after this. Next year nak belajar IT, nak belajar apa ni? Apa panggil apa? Artificial intelligence, contohnya AI. I was told with 3 months micro credential of 1 or 2 subjects, you can already do something, generate income. Within 3 months. This is very easy because the software now is so user friendly. You don't have to macam dulu buat coding macam kita belajar, semua tu tak ada. So the third point I would like to emphasize here, we would like, this is what I learned from some friends. Dia kata scholars dia tak boleh jadi 3-4 tahun tau. It takes 20 years, 30 years to become a scholar in dedicated field. So if you are already close to that 30 years, you continue lah 30 years tu. Tapi basic kita ialah tentang Islamic studies, assuming we need to know languages, we need to know fardu ain aspect, Quran, Sunnah dan sebagainya. And I was told in the past, tak ada subjek yang bernama. Tak ada kata, okay, kita belajar tasawuf dengan ni. I mean, you belajar from a scholar. Sebab tu saya cenderung, lepas saya belajar, I'm involved in higher education for some time, I tend to go back to the traditional Islamic teaching. You find a book, you find a scholar to learn from. That is more, I think, fulfilling compared to you belajar dengan seorang tu, dia ambil sikit sana sikit. Akhirnya you tak tahu, you don't have a textbook to refer to. Sebab tu hari ni kita bincang buku-buku. I've ni belajar Islam and Secularism dengan Prof Zaini. 3 kelas. I belajar buku ni 4 kelas, 5 kelas, tentu. Rather than suruh you bincang tentang Islam and Secularism, tak perlu menggunakan textbook. So textual education is very important. Sebab tu dalam dia yang buku yang 54 halaman jilid yang Western
Great Books of the Western
World. Great Book of the Western World tu dia bincang pasal buku. So what I think important for us, nombor satu tadi, kita continue our education to be a master of our field, and after 10 years, 20 years, we become expert in it. We need expert. Yang kedua, fardu ain, benda-benda yang berkaitan dengan perkara yang we are lacking at. Dan yang ketiga, kita ke textual base. Cari teks, you dah habis, dah khatam Riyadus Solihin, dah khatam Ihya Ulumuddin, dah khatam Islam and Civilization, Islam and Secularism dan sebagainya lah. So at the end of the day, kita dah khatam 100 buku. I make sure that lepas kita khatam tu, kita ngajar orang ke tidak, nanti hilang macam tu.
That is tradition, that is said dalam tradisi Islam, talaqi. Because dalam talaqi, Dato si, dia, because number one, in the tradition, you read from the Arabic. So the teacher will read, you will listen, and then sometimes you have to read to the teacher because the teacher want to see whether you read it correctly or not, because dia tak ada i'rab. Because different fathah, dhamma, kasrah means many things, you know. So yeah, betul Dato si, that you have to have a book and you have to read it, because this talaqi is very important. Antara makna talaqi is laqiyah, is to meet, actually to meet the person, to meet the author of the book.
Kalau online kan? Kalau online dia ke talaqi je?
Online, depending. It is, I think it is talaqi juga, if you ask my opinion, because the person is alive, not recorded. It's live online, yes, not recorded, because if it is recorded, it's no longer live. But that, tapi itu dalam pelajaran sajalah, tak boleh juga kata I ikut semayang online dengan Mekah lah. It doesn't work that way. You see. Tapi betul Dato' Seri, I agree with you, the importance of the book. It is talaqi dalam tradisi Islam, and the reason being because you want to find finer points, because the author can really explain what he means by a certain word. And this is, I remember I was telling Dr. Hilmi, a book he gave me as a hadiah. It's a book on the works of Ibn Arabi, and Ibn Arabi was explaining why is it important for you to sit with a sheikh. Because when you sit with a sheikh, the sheikh is not addressing your intellect, he's addressing your qalb. Because humility, sitting before a sheikh, is not an intellectual thing. Sebab tu dalam cerita-cerita Melayu lama tentang anak raya nak pergi belajar, kena tinggal gajah, kena jalan kaki sendiri pakai baju biasa. It's the humility, because the soul must be ready to receive instruction. Otherwise, you still being, there are impediments to your bodily thing that make you proud. Pride is the enemy of knowledge.
Yeah.
Sebab itu ghurur tu kan. Ghurur, because it's pride. Both to the teacher and to the student. Ghurur ni, pride. And that's itu yang virtues yang Prof al-Attas tu. So virtue ni kena juga tekankan Dato' Seri. Element tu missing, no.
Kalau if I understand correctly, yang Dato' Seri cakap tadi, kalau dekat surau-surau masjid, pembelajaran kuliah-kuliah, pendekatan tu ada dua. Yang pertama, kuliah-kuliah yang berkitab ni. So, Ustaz cakap, jadi kita pun boleh bersedia sebelum pergi. Satu lagi ni, dia datang ceramah open-ended lah. So, mungkin dari segi time kita allocate tu lebih kepada yang berkitab lah. Bukannya tak relevan kan yang ceramah tu.
Kena bagi tempoh lah, jangan
5 tahun jugalah, 1 semester kan.
Kata Ustaz, kita baca kitabnya setahun. Ustaz kena cepat sikit lah. Ustaz jangan banyak syarah-syarahnya. Kadang perempuan, okey lah kita masuk kitab dah setengah jam dah. Nak masuk kitab 15 minit dah habis.
Kadang dia kata lagi lama lagi bagus.
Tak ada, just straight to the point, discuss betul words by words. Ya.
Terima kasih. Nanti saya bagi tahu kat pengurusi surau dia.
Ya,
Okay.
macam contoh Prof al-Attas bila dia mengajar religion, the religion of Islam dekat ISTA, he uses that buku yang Islam concept religion, and he managed to finish it within 14 weeks. Yeah. And then he also shows different parts relevant from this book, Islam and Secularism. So you ada text, and that becomes something that the student can hold on nanti. Kalau tidak, cakap angin-angin je kan. Yeah, it's important. Yeah.
So that is my credential lah. Okay. Kita dah banyak masa. We have already exceeded 5 PM. Despite this is the raya mood, kita patutnya pergi menziarahi sana sini. Hari ni kita ada kuih raya sikit lah.
Alhamdulillah.
Kat sini pun ada. Semalam ada majlis raya kat sini. Terima kasih siapa yang datang. Datang semalam. Aku tak tahulah ramai sangat datang semalam jadi. Tak benar semalam penuh. Tapi terima kasih siapa yang datang semalam dan hari ni. Jadi kita akan tangguhkan majlis kita ni sampai bulan Ogos. Ya. Jadi doakan saya perjalanan dapat jumpa dengan scholars and I can reactivate my activities with them for the future. Kita akhiri majlis dengan tasbih kifarah dan Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.